The courthouse doors had barely shut behind us when my former father-in-law stepped straight into my path. Richard Hale planted his cane on the concrete outside the Franklin County Courthouse and looked at me like I was still the grease-stained mechanic he had never believed belonged in his daughter's life. "Don't ever set foot in my daughter's house again," he said, loud enough for strangers on the courthouse steps to turn their heads. Vanessa stood a few feet behind him in a cream-colored suit, arms folded, a small satisfied smile on her face. The divorce was final. In her mind, she had kept the company, the respect, the story, and the future. I adjusted the old manila envelope under my arm and rolled my right shoulder once, trying to ease the familiar ache from an injury I got fixing a machine 20 years earlier. Then I looked at Richard. "Actually," I said, "the house closed this morning." His expression barely moved. "What house?" "The Granville house. I sold it." Vanessa gave a short laugh. "So," I added the second part, "and Vanessa isn't CEO anymore." For 2 seconds, nobody said anything. Then she laughed harder. Richard joined her, shaking his head like I had finally embarrassed myself beyond repair. "Daniel," Vanessa said, "you really have lost your mind." I reached into the envelope and pulled out the attorney's notice. "Richard, you have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings." He didn't take it. Vanessa stopped smiling. And for the first time in 26 years, neither of them knew what I was going to do next. 6 months earlier, I still believed a marriage could be repaired if both people finally stopped pretending. I was wrong. A marriage does not always end when someone cheats or signs papers. Sometimes it dies in smaller ways. So quietly you mistake it for routine. It was Vanessa walking into my office only when she needed a signature. It was eating dinner alone because she had another investor call, another client dinner, another industry panel where spouses were inconvenient. It was watching her introduce herself as the founder of Meridian Precision Robotics while I stood 2 feet away, invisible. The worst version happened at the Ohio Manufacturing Excellence Awards in Columbus. Meridian had just been honored for 26 years in business. I sat at table 17, wearing the jacket I wore to Emma's graduation. Vanessa walked onto the stage like she had been born under spotlights. "When I started Meridian," she told the room, "I had nothing but a rented shop, a stubborn dream, and the courage to bet on myself." People applauded. "I built this company into what it is today because I refused to quit." More applause. I waited for the part where she mentioned the people who had refused to quit with her. The machinists, the engineers, my father, maybe even me. Instead, she smiled and said, "Thank you for believing in my vision." That was it. I kept my face still, but something inside me went cold. Not because I needed applause, I cared about the truth. I remembered the first shop we rented. One loading dock and a used CNC mill that broke down constantly. I remembered sleeping on an office couch because a part had to be finished by morning. I remembered taking machines apart because we could not afford service calls. I remembered payroll Fridays. People think payroll is just numbers until you are staring at a bank balance that is too low and a list of employees with mortgages. I remembered calling suppliers for 10 more days. I remembered moving money from our account so checks would clear. And I remembered my father. He had sold land outside Newark and brought me a cashier's check for $285,000. He laid it on my workbench and said, "If your name is on this place, then your backbone better be too." That money did not make us rich. It kept us alive. Alive became stable. Stable became profitable. Profitable became the company Vanessa now called hers. A week later, I noticed she had stopped wearing her wedding ring on business trips. Not every time, just often enough that denying it felt stupid. I said nothing. Silence had become the tool I used most. Then one Thursday evening, she came home with a folder. I was in the garage fixing my father's old radio, because I needed my hands to do something that made sense. She placed the folder on the workbench. "I've already signed," she said. "Divorce papers, no warning, no fight, just her signature waiting for mine." "What happened to us?" I asked. She sighed. "Daniel, we've been partners on paper for years." Maybe she was right, but partners on paper do not erase each other. "My attorney says I can make sure you're comfortable," she said. Comfortable. After 26 years, I asked her one question. "What do you think I contributed to Meridian?" She looked genuinely confused. Then she said, "You handled the numbers." 4 words. Not the machines, not the payroll, not the vendors, not the employees whose names I knew before she knew their titles. Just numbers. After she left, I stayed in the garage until the radio parts blurred in front of me. I did not cry. I sat there, trying to understand how the woman I had built a life beside could look at 26 years and see only paperwork. 2 days after Vanessa left the divorce papers on my workbench, I met Naomi Chen. Naomi had served on Meridian's board for almost 11 years. She was not loud, not sentimental, and not easily impressed, which was why I trusted her. We met at a small coffee shop off High Street, far enough from the plant that nobody from work would accidentally walk past our table. She listened while I told her everything. The awards dinner, the papers, Adrian Cole, the sentence I could not get out of my head. You handled the numbers. When I finished, Naomi did not ask what I wanted from the settlement. She did not ask how much money Vanessa had offered, or whether I had hired the right attorney. She stirred her coffee once and asked, "What do you actually want, Dan?" I looked through the window at traffic sliding through the rain. "I want her to stop telling the story like I was never there." Naomi nodded, as if that answer mattered more than any dollar amount. Then, she asked a question that made me look back at her. "Have you signed this year's voting proxy?" I frowned. "No, I don't think so." "You haven't? How do you know?" "Because I checked." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick corporate binder with blue tabs along the side. Turned to section 7. I almost laughed. "Naomi, I spent half my life reading these things." "Then, read this one like it belongs to you." That stopped me. I turned the pages until I found the ownership schedule. Same names, same percentages, same dry legal language I had seen for years without feeling anything. Naomi tapped one line with her pen. "You own 36% of Meridian." "I know that." "You own 36% of the equity," she said. "But your Class A preferred shares carry 4 votes per share." I stared at the page. My father insisted on that. He did. And he was smart. The memory came back with uncomfortable clarity. Dad standing beside our kitchen table, reading the investment agreement slowly, refusing to sign until his attorney added protections. Back then, I thought he was being cautious, maybe even stubborn. Naomi continued, "Those shares cannot be converted without your written consent. They cannot be diluted without your approval. And the holder retains a board seat unless he formally waives it." I sat back. For 14 years, Vanessa's assistant had emailed me a proxy before every annual meeting. I signed it. Vanessa voted my shares. Nobody argued. Nobody questioned it. "I trusted my wife," I said. Naomi's expression softened. "I know. Did Vanessa forget?" "No." Naomi closed the binder halfway. "That would make this cleaner." "She didn't forget. She got comfortable." The words landed harder than I expected. Comfortable. Comfortable taking my signature. Comfortable using my votes. Comfortable believing I would keep handing over power because I always had. "So, what happens if I don't sign?" "For the first time in 14 years, Naomi said, "Vanessa does not control your votes." The coffee shop noise seemed to fade around me. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I felt embarrassed, not because I had been cheated in the legal sense, because I had been predictable. Naomi leaned forward. "Before you do anything, I need to be clear. If this is about punishing Vanessa for Adrian, don't use the company." I met her eyes. "That's not what I want." "Good. Because the board is not a divorce court." "I understand. But if Meridian's leadership is making decisions that hurt employees, shareholders, or the company's integrity," she said, tapping the binder again, "then this is not revenge. This is governance." I looked down at my father's name in the old agreement. For the first time since Vanessa handed me those papers, I realized I was not trapped. I had a choice, and that scared me more than losing. Over the next few weeks, the divorce became a stack of folders: bank statements, retirement accounts, property appraisals, insurance schedules, 26 years of marriage reduced to tabs, signatures, and numbers nobody wanted to say out loud. Vanessa was pleasant whenever attorneys were in the room. That bothered me more than anger would have. She treated the whole process like a negotiation she had already won. During one mediation session, my attorney brought up the Granville house. It had belonged to my parents before they died. Years earlier, when Meridian nearly collapsed, Vanessa and I had used the house as collateral to secure a business line of credit. That made part of its value complicated in the settlement, but the meaning of it had never been complicated to me. Vanessa barely looked at the appraisal. "I don't want it," she said. Her attorney paused. "You're sure? It needs a roof, new plumbing, and half the windows leak," she said. Then she looked at me. "Daniel can keep his museum." I said nothing. She wanted the downtown Columbus condo instead. She wanted most of the liquid investment account, the boat on Lake Erie, and the brokerage assets she could move without waiting on contractors. By the end of the afternoon, Vanessa formally waived any future claim to the Granville house. She even signed the quitclaim paperwork without reading the last page twice. In the hallway afterward, I heard her tell her attorney, "He thinks he won something sentimental. I got the real assets." Maybe she believed that. Maybe that was the problem. The first time I understood, Richard Hale had already erased me from my own house. I had just come back from a physical therapy appointment. My right shoulder was sore, and the November air had that damp Ohio cold that gets into old injuries. I stepped through the front door of the Granville house and stopped. Cardboard boxes lined the hallway. One was marked storage. Another was marked trash. I knelt beside the second box and opened it. On top was my father's pocket watch, wrapped badly in an old dish towel. Under it were his work gloves, the ones he wore the day he helped me move our first milling machine into the rented shop. There was a folder of Meridian's earliest invoices, my production notebooks, a faded photograph of me covered in coolant beside a broken CNC spindle, and a picture of Emma asleep on 2 stacked shipping blankets while I finished payroll at midnight. A small brass nameplate from our first office had been bent at one corner. I held it in my hand longer than I meant to. Richard walked in from the kitchen carrying a mug of coffee like he lived there. "You shouldn't leave this junk around," he said. I looked up. "My father's things are junk," he shrugged. "They're reminders of a life you need to let go." I closed the box carefully because, if I moved too fast, I was afraid I would say something I could not take back. "They're not just reminders," I said. "They're proof." He gave me the same thin smile he used whenever he wanted to sound civilized while being cruel. Later that evening, I heard him on the phone near the kitchen. "Adrian will love the place once we tear out that old garage," he said. "And the kitchen cabinet's gone. Vanessa deserves something modern." I stood in the hallway, silent. Richard was not just packing my things. He was making plans for a house he had never owned. The following Monday, Miguel Santos called me. Miguel had been Meridian's outside auditor for almost 15 years, and he was not the kind of man who wasted words. If he called directly instead of sending a memo through accounting, something was wrong. "Dan," he said, "do you have a minute?" I set down the wrench in my hand. "What did you find?" He was quiet for half a second. "Executive retention bonuses. 3 of them. All connected to Adrian Cole." I leaned against the workbench. "Were they approved?" "Not fully. Not by the whole board." That was enough to make my stomach tighten. But Miguel kept going. "There's also a Vail trip listed as client development. Supposedly a customer automation conference. Supposedly, no conference registration, no scheduled client meetings, no vendor appointments." He paused. "1 hotel suite." I closed my eyes. Miguel's voice stayed careful. "There's more. Hourly retirement contributions were reduced last quarter, while executive bonus accruals increased." For a few seconds, all I could think about was Walter Briggs, 67 years old. Bad knees, still arriving before sunrise because he trusted the company to do right by him. "Is it criminal?" I asked. "I'm not saying that," Miguel replied. "But it is a governance problem, a serious one." After we hung up, I stayed in the garage for nearly half an hour, staring at nothing. The divorce had hurt. Adrian had humiliated me. But if Vanessa had used company money and employee benefits to protect her private life, then this was no longer just about my marriage. That evening, Emma came over. She stood in the kitchen with both hands wrapped around a mug she never drank from. "Dad," she said. I knew. I looked at her. "About your mother and Adrian?" Her face crumpled. "For how long?" "Almost a year." The words hit harder because she whispered them. "Mom said you already knew." She said the marriage was over. I thought if I stayed out of it, I wasn't choosing sides. I nodded slowly, even though something inside me had gone very still. "Silence doesn't stay neutral forever," I said. The next morning, Naomi called before 8. "Miguel finished the review," she said, "and we have enough to call an emergency board meeting." "When?" "Tomorrow," she said. 10 o'clock. I barely slept the night before the board meeting. Not because I was afraid of Vanessa. I had been married to her for 26 years. I knew her temper, her charm, and the way she could make a room question its own memory. What scared me was the possibility that I was wrong. At 52, you stop believing every hard choice comes with a clean moral label. I could call this governance. Naomi could call it governance. But my wife had betrayed me. My daughter had hidden it, and my father-in-law was throwing my life into cardboard boxes. Of course it was personal. The question was whether personal meant unfair. At 5:40 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the garage. My father's old radio still sat open on the bench. I tried to fit one tiny screw back into place and dropped it twice because my right hand had stiffened overnight. Around 7, my phone buzzed. "Naomi, I know what you're doing," she said. I almost smiled. "Do you? You're deciding whether walking into that room makes you the angry ex-husband." I looked at the workbench. "Does it?" "It would if Miguel's report were clean," she said. "No undisclosed bonuses, no questionable travel expenses, no benefit cuts for hourly employees. I would tell you to sign the settlement, sell the house, and walk away. And because the report isn't clean, then your responsibility is not to Vanessa," Naomi said. "It's to Meridian." After the call, I drove to the plant. The Meridian Precision Robotics sign appeared through the gray morning light. Blue letters mounted on steel my own hands had helped install. For a second, I saw the old shop instead. 6,500 square feet. One loading dock, one frozen bathroom, and a coffee maker that burned everything it touched. Vanessa and I used to eat pizza on overturned shipping crates when we landed a new order. Back then, she made the calls and I made sure we could actually build what she promised. We were not enemies. We were a team too tired to keep score. That memory almost turned me around. Almost. Inside, the plant sounded normal. Forklifts chirped in reverse. Someone laughed near the time clock. A supervisor walked past, holding a clipboard like nothing in the world was about to change upstairs. That steadied me. They did not need drama. They needed the company to survive the truth. I took the elevator to the executive floor. Naomi and Miguel were already in the small conference room beside the boardroom. Miguel had the pale face of a man who wished his numbers had told a better story. "I reviewed everything again," he said. "And no material changes. I wish you had found some." "So do I." At 9:12, Gerald Price arrived. He had been on our board for 9 years and had always admired Vanessa's ability to win customers. "Dan," he said, "I need to be honest. I'm uncomfortable with this. I would be worried if you weren't. This looks like divorce bleeding into corporate governance." "It is divorce," I said, "and it is corporate governance." I opened Miguel's summary and slid it toward him. "If this report had Vanessa's name removed and any other CEO's name at the top, would we still be required to meet?" Gerald read the first page, then the second. "Finally," he said. "Yes, that was all I needed." At 9:40 my attorney called. "The judge signed the decree," she said. "The settlement is final." I closed my eyes. "And the Granville property, the title company can complete the closing as soon as Oliver Grant signs the final confirmation. Vanessa's waiver is recorded." I thanked her and ended the call. For a moment, I stood in the hallway staring at my phone. The house was mine alone, at least long enough for me to decide its future. Vanessa had not been tricked. She had chosen the condo, the accounts, the boat, the things she could point to and call value. She had let my father's house go because she thought sentiment was weakness. At 9:55, another email appeared. Subject: shareholder proxy authorization. It came from Vanessa's executive assistant, the same template I had received every year for 14 years. "Please, sign at your earliest convenience." I stared at it longer than I should have. My thumb hovered over the attachment out of pure habit. Then I forwarded it to Naomi. Her reply came back in less than 10 seconds. "Do not respond." That email said more than Vanessa ever would. She was not trying to steal my vote. She simply believed she still owned my trust. At 9:59, Naomi opened the boardroom door. At exactly 10 o'clock, we heard Vanessa's heels in the hallway. At exactly 10 o'clock, Vanessa walked into the boardroom, as if she owned the building, the table, and everyone sitting around it. She wore a cream suit, gold watch, and the kind of calm smile she used when she expected people to stand when she entered. Her phone was still in her hand. A paper coffee cup sat between 2 fingers. "Morning," she said. "Sorry, my call ran long." Nobody answered. Her eyes moved around the table and stopped on me. The smile thinned. "What is he doing here?" I did not answer. Naomi closed the folder in front of her. "Dan is a director and a voting shareholder." Vanessa gave a short laugh. "He hasn't attended a board meeting in years." "He is attending this one," Naomi said. Vanessa looked at Gerald, then at the other directors, searching for the familiar little smiles that usually followed her jokes. She found none. Slowly, she sat at the far end of the table. "Fine," she said. "Let's get through whatever this is." Miguel placed a report in front of her. "You'll want to start with page 3, he said. Vanessa looked at the cover, then at him. "Why is our outside auditor running today's meeting?" "He isn't," Naomi said. "He is presenting findings." The room went still enough that I could hear the hum of the lights above us. Vanessa opened the folder. Her face changed before she reached the second page. What am I looking at? Miguel kept his voice even. Executive retention bonuses, travel reimbursement, employee benefit adjustments, and related party conflict concerns. Vanessa's eyes snapped toward me. So, this is what we're doing now. This is not about the divorce, Naomi said. Vanessa laughed once, sharp and bitter. Of course it is. Miguel turned a page. 3 bonus approvals connected to Adrian Cole did not receive full board review. They were standard retention incentives. They were not documented that way, Naomi added, and the board was not informed of your personal relationship with Mr. Cole when those approvals were processed. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Miguel continued. The Vail trip was categorized as client development. We found no client meeting scheduled, no conference registration, and 1 hotel suite. For the first time. Vanessa did not answer immediately. Then she looked at me. You planned this. I met her eyes. I planned to tell the truth. Her voice dropped. You would damage Meridian just to punish me. The old version of me might have defended myself too much. This time, I only shook my head. I'm not trying to destroy Meridian, I said. I'm trying to stop you from destroying the company we built. No one moved. Naomi placed a printed resolution in front of each director. The board will now consider leadership action, she said. Vanessa stared at the paper. The investigation was over. The vote was about to begin. Nobody reached for the resolution right away. For the first time since I had known her, Vanessa looked around a boardroom and could not find the room bending toward her. Usually, she controlled silence. This silence belonged to someone else. Naomi folded her hands. Before we vote, Vanessa, you have the right to respond. Vanessa sat back. My relationship with Adrian is personal. Dan and I were separated emotionally long before paperwork was filed. Naomi nodded. The board is not evaluating your marriage. Then stop pretending this isn't about it. It became a board matter when an executive who had a private relationship with the CEO received compensation decisions the board did not fully review. Miguel slid 3 pages forward. The first retention bonus was not disclosed to the full board. The second was coded under strategic talent protection. The third was entered after the Vail trip was booked. They were legal, Vanessa said. Maybe, Miguel replied. But legality is not the only standard here. He turned another page. The Vail expense report lists client development. We found no client meetings, no conference badge, no vendor dinner, and no customer records matching those dates. Vanessa's fingers tapped the table. You had no right to dig through my private life. Naomi's voice sharpened. We reviewed company records. That distinction settled over the room. Vanessa still thought embarrassment was the injury. She did not understand that the injury was trust. Every supervisor had to document a small tool purchase. Every hourly employee had to wait for overtime approval. But she had treated executive privilege like a personal credit line. Vanessa turned toward me. You know Meridian doubled in value while I was CEO. I know. Then say it. It doubled, I said. And it also belongs to shareholders, lenders, and 165 people who come through that door every morning. Her mouth tightened. Now you're hiding behind the employees. No, I said. I spent 26 years standing behind them. I thought of Walter Briggs showing up with swollen knees because he trusted our retirement plan. I thought of payroll checks, late trucks, and fathers who needed overtime before Christmas. I am not asking the board to punish you for leaving me, I said. I am asking whether Meridian can trust you to keep private interests out of corporate decisions. Naomi lifted the first resolution. Motion 1 concerns Adrian Cole. Withdrawal of the pending Chief Operating Officer promotion. Administrative leave effective immediately. And authorization for an independent review of compensation and expense approvals related to Mr. Cole. Vanessa stood halfway. You cannot do that without me. Yes, Naomi said. We can. The vote came quickly. Yes, yes, yes. Gerald hesitated, then raised his hand. Yes. Naomi marked the result. The motion passes unanimously. Vanessa's face changed, not fear yet. Disbelief. Naomi lifted the second resolution. The next motion concerns the position of Chief Executive Officer. The recommendation is removal of Vanessa Hale Mercer as CEO, effective immediately, and appointment of Helen Park as interim CEO pending a permanent search. Vanessa pushed her chair back so hard it struck the wall. This is insane. No one answered. She looked at Gerald. You know what I built, Gerald exhaled. I know what you built. Then, vote no. He stared at the table. I also know what you failed to disclose. Vanessa turned to another director. Then, another. Every face that used to open for her closed a little more. Finally, she looked at me. "This is your doing," Naomi answered before I could. "No. This is the board's decision." The vote began. One hand, then another, then another. Gerald's hand stayed on the table for several seconds. I watched him fight with loyalty and one stack of facts. Then he raised it. Naomi counted quietly. "The motion passes." Vanessa stared at her. "You're making a mistake. Effective immediately," Naomi said. "You are removed as Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Precision Robotics." There was no applause, no raised voices, no victory. Just the awful quiet of a room accepting what had become unavoidable. Naomi slid one final document toward me. "Dan, as Class A shareholder, I need your certification signature." My right hand stiffened around the pen. The old injury in my knuckles pulsed, the kind of pain that came from years of gripping tools too long and pretending it was nothing. I signed my name slowly. Daniel Mercer. For once. The record used the whole thing. Vanessa looked at the signature like it had betrayed her. A soft knock came at the door. Martin Ellis, our facilities manager, stepped inside. He had worked for Meridian almost 12 years and looked as if he would rather be anywhere else. "Miss Mercer," he said carefully, "whenever you're ready, I can help you collect your personal items from the executive office. Not security, not humiliation, just procedure." That somehow made it heavier. Vanessa did not move. Her title, the one she had worn like armor, was gone because of reports, resolutions, votes, and one signature she had assumed would always belong to her. Less than an hour later, I walked out of Meridian alone. The July air felt heavy, and the parking lot shimmered under the kind of heat that made every breath feel slower. I should have felt relief, maybe even satisfaction. Instead, I felt emptied out, like a machine that had kept running long after the power was cut. My phone rang before I reached my truck. It was my attorney. "Dan," she said, "the closing is complete." I stopped beside the driver's door. Oliver signed. He did. Oliver Grant is now the legal owner of the Granville property. I closed my eyes. For months, I had imagined that sentence would feel like winning. It did not. It made me miss my father so sharply I had to grip the truck handle. He would have liked Oliver. A man who restored old houses instead of flattening them. The house would survive. That mattered more than victory. I drove to Granville because there was one last box I had left behind. Not furniture, not anything expensive, just a cardboard box of old plant badges, my father's measuring calipers, and the first set of keys from the rented shop where Meridian began. When I pulled onto the street, Oliver Grant was already standing near the front porch with his realtor. He wore jeans, a linen shirt, and the calm expression of a man who understood old houses were not projects. They were promises. Then Vanessa's car turned the corner. She parked hard against the curb but did not get out right away. Before I could reach the porch, the front door opened. Richard stepped outside, cane in hand, his mouth already tightened into judgment. He moved as quickly as his knees allowed and planted himself between me and the walkway. "Don't ever set foot in my daughter's house again," he said. "You've taken enough." Several neighbors turned from their yards. I looked past him at the porch my father had repaired twice with his own hands. "Actually, Richard," I said, "the sale closed this morning." His eyes narrowed. "What sale?" "The Granville house. I sold it." He laughed once. Short and ugly. "You can't sell Vanessa's house." It was never Vanessa's house. Vanessa got out of her car then. Her face had gone pale, but she kept walking like motion alone could keep the truth away. "And Vanessa isn't CEO anymore," I said. Richard looked at her. For once, she had no polished answer. Oliver stepped forward gently. "Mr. Hale, I'm Oliver Grant." Richard ignored him. Oliver opened a folder anyway and held out the documents. "I'm the new owner." Richard snatched the papers and scanned them with angry, shaking hands. The settlement agreement, Vanessa's waiver, the quitclaim deed, the closing confirmation. Then he found her signature. He looked at his daughter. "You signed this." Vanessa swallowed. "I didn't think he'd actually—" "No," Richard cut in. "You didn't think—" For the first time since I had known him, Richard looked old instead of powerful. A patrol officer arrived a few minutes later. One of the neighbors had called after hearing the shouting. He reviewed the paperwork, listened to Oliver, then turned to Richard with professional patience. "Sir, the property legally transferred this morning. According to this occupancy agreement, you have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings." Richard's face reddened. "You're throwing out a 76-year-old man." "No," Oliver said quietly. "I arranged movers. They can help you pack whatever you need. That kindness seemed to offend Richard more than anger would have. That was when I noticed what he held under his left arm. 3 sample boards. White tile, gray stone, pale maple cabinet facing. He had been planning a new kitchen. Oliver followed my eyes and smiled faintly. For what it's worth, I'm keeping the original cabinets, the garage too. That workbench belongs with the house. I had to look away for a second. I picked up my last box from the hallway and walked back toward my truck. Vanessa followed me. Dan. Wait. I stopped. I need you to fix this, she said. The house, the board. Her voice cracked. You still have influence. Talk to Naomi. Tell them this went too far. For one foolish second, I thought she might say she wanted our life back. Then she said, I need my job. I believed her. That hurt more than I expected. You still don't understand what you lost, I said. She looked at me like I was being cruel. All I ever asked for, I said, was respect. Then I put the box in my truck and drove away before the house could become another argument. 3 weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. Meridian Precision Robotics, Annual Employee Appreciation Banquet. For almost 10 minutes, I stood in my kitchen holding it over the trash can. There are invitations that feel like courtesy and invitations that feel like a test. This one felt like both. Then, I noticed the handwriting at the bottom of the card. Please come. Stay until the end. Naomi. I read that line 3 times before setting the invitation on the counter. The banquet was held at Koosai in downtown Columbus, the same place Vanessa had loved, because the glass atrium made every company photograph look expensive. By the time I arrived, the room was already full of linen-covered tables, name cards, coffee cups, and employees who had spent decades pretending work was just work when everyone knew it had become family. I stopped near the entrance. Vanessa was there. She stood along the back wall in a black dress and silver earrings, one hand wrapped tightly around a glass of water. She was still a shareholder, so legally no one could keep her from attending, but she was not at the head table. No executives surrounded her. No customers waited to shake her hand. People nodded politely when they passed, then kept walking. I knew that kind of loneliness. For years, I had sat in rooms where everyone looked through me to reach her. Now she stood in a room that remembered her title, but no longer organized itself around it. I almost left. Naomi found me before I could turn around. Dan, she said softly, I'm glad you came. I'm not sure I should have. You should. I glanced toward Vanessa. Is tonight about making a point? No, Naomi said. Tonight is about correcting one. That answer stayed with me. Dinner moved slowly. People came by my table in cautious waves. A machinist from second shift told me he was sorry about everything. A retired receptionist hugged me longer than expected. One younger engineer said he had found my old production notes in the archives and wished someone had shown them to him years earlier. I did not know what to do with any of it, so I mostly said thank you. Near dessert, Walter Briggs lowered himself into the chair beside mine. His knees cracked loud enough that he laughed. Still making that noise, I asked. Only when I'm alive. I smiled for the first real time that night. Walter studied me. You look like a man waiting for bad news. I've had practice. Well, he said, nodding toward the stage. This might be the other kind. What kind is that? He patted my shoulder carefully, avoiding the bad one. The kind you earned. Before I could ask what he meant, the lights dimmed. Naomi walked onto the stage, and the room began to quiet. Naomi stepped to the microphone and waited until the last conversation faded. For 26 years, she said, Meridian Precision Robotics has told one story about how this company began. The screen behind her lit up. The first photograph showed Vanessa in the original rented shop, standing beside our first customer, with the smile that had won half our early accounts. Then the next photograph appeared. Me, 26 years younger, kneeling beside a CNC mill with the side panel removed, both hands black with oil. A few people laughed. I remembered that night. The spindle had seized at 11:30 and the order was due by sunrise. I stayed until the machine ran again. Another picture followed. A card table covered in invoices. Me asleep in a folding chair, one hand still resting on a payroll ledger. Then Emma appeared on the screen. 3 years old, curled up on shipping blankets beneath my desk. The room warmed with laughter, but my throat closed. The next photograph nearly undid me. My father stood beside our first real CNC machine, one hand on the blue steel frame, smiling like he had bought more than equipment. He had bought time. Naomi turned back to the room. Our official history has always named one founder, she said. That history was incomplete. The next slide was plain white with black letters. Founders: Vanessa Hale Mercer, Daniel Mercer. No music. No dramatic effect, just two names where there should have always been two. For a moment, I could not breathe. Naomi continued, some people build a company by winning the sale. Some build it by making sure the sale can actually be delivered, by keeping machines running, by protecting payroll, by calling suppliers before sunrise, by remembering that behind every badge number is a person with bills, children, and pride. Across the room, Walter Briggs stood up. His movement was slow, almost difficult, but once he was standing, he stayed there. Then, another person stood. Then, another. Within seconds, nearly the entire room was on its feet. The applause did not feel like celebration. It felt like grief finally given somewhere to go. Naomi motioned toward the stage. I shook my head once. She did not lower her hand. So, I stood. The walk to the microphone felt longer than any hallway in that courthouse. My right hand trembled, so I wrapped it around the edge of the podium. I don't have a speech, I said. A few people laughed. That's probably good for all of you. More laughter. Softer this time. I looked back at the slide, at my father's photograph still waiting in the corner. I never needed a plaque, I said. I never needed my name in bigger letters. I just needed the record to stop lying. The room went quiet. Meridian was not built by one person. It was built by machinists who missed dinner to finish orders. By welders, engineers, forklift drivers, receptionists, bookkeepers, maintenance crews, supervisors, and families who paid the price of every late night. I swallowed. My father used to tell me that work only means something if people are treated like more than the cost of doing business. Many of you reminded me of that every day. I looked around the room. Thank you for letting me be part of what we built. When the applause came again, I could not look at Vanessa. After the program, people gathered around me in small circles. Some shook my hand, some hugged me, some simply nodded. Walter waited until the crowd thinned. You left something out, he said. My wife's surgery. I looked down. That was private. Not anymore. He turned to younger employees nearby. Linda needed heart surgery in 2008. Insurance was a mess. Dan arranged in advance, then showed up at our house with food for 2 weeks. Walter, he ignored me. Vanessa knew how to make the company look important, he said. Dan knew how to make the people inside it feel safe. No one applauded. They just nodded. Some truths do not need noise. I noticed Vanessa near the exit after most people had left. She was standing beside the glass wall overlooking the city lights, holding her coat across one arm for a moment. She looked less like the woman who had run boardrooms and more like someone trying to remember where the ground had gone. Dan, she said. I stopped, but I did not step closer. She looked toward the empty stage. I should have given you more credit. There was a time when I would have taken that sentence and tried to build a bridge from it. I would have told myself it was enough, that she was trying, that after 26 years, some recognition was better than none. But, standing there, I finally understood the difference. Credit was not what I was asking for, I said. Vanessa lowered her eyes. You should have given me respect. She nodded slowly. I know. Maybe she did. Maybe losing the title, the room, and the story had finally made her understand what words alone never could. After a while, she asked, do you think you'll ever forgive me? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something inside me loosen. I already have. Her face lifted with a kind of fragile hope. But forgiveness is not permission to come back. The hope faded, but she did not argue. Outside, Emma found me near the canal. She wrapped both arms around me and held on like she was afraid I might disappear. I'm proud of you, Dad, she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. I'm proud of you, too. For what? For learning that you don't have to carry other people's lies to keep the peace. She cried a little then. So did I. Life became quieter after that, which surprised me more than the chaos ever had. I bought a small one-story house in Westerville with a narrow garden behind it and an old detached workshop that smelled like sawdust when it rained. There were no stairs to punish my shoulder, no formal dining room nobody used, and enough space for Emma whenever she wanted to stay over without feeling like she was choosing sides. I started consulting for small manufacturing companies 3 days a month, mostly family shops, places with old machines, thin margins, and owners who still knew the names of the people on second shift. I helped them build systems without losing their souls. Oliver Grant sent me photographs from the Granville house every few weeks. He kept the hardwood floors. He restored the front porch. He saved the kitchen cabinets Richard had wanted to tear out. And in the garage, he left my father's workbench exactly where it had always been. 3 months later, a handwritten envelope arrived with Richard Hale's return address. I let it sit on the counter for 2 days before opening it. Dan, I was wrong about the house. I was wrong about your place in the company. I mistook quiet work for small work, and I am sorry. Richard, I did not answer right away. A few weeks later, I mailed him a card after Emma told me he had hip surgery. Compassion did not erase the past. It only meant I no longer wanted to live inside it. Looking back, people sometimes ask which part finally healed me. Was it watching Vanessa lose the title she had used to erase me? No. Was it selling the Granville house before Richard could turn my father's workbench into scrapwood? No. Was it seeing my name restored as a founder of Meridian Precision Robotics? That mattered. More than I can explain. But it still was not the thing that healed me. What healed me was finally understanding that I did not have to keep proving my value to people who had already decided not to see it. A man can be loyal and still walk away. He can be calm and still be wounded. He can forgive and still lock the door behind him. Peace is worth protecting. Dignity is worth protecting, and it is never too late to stop apologizing for knowing what you brought to the table. If someone once made you feel invisible, I hope you remember this. You were there, you mattered, and you are not alone.